Welcome everyone to the Expat Woman Show. Have you ever experienced workplace culture shock when you've moved abroad as an expat? I'm very excited today to have Tanya join me to chat all about dealing with workplace culture shock, how to navigate it, and how to really turn it to your advantage. So,
Mhm.
before I introduce myself, I'd love to have Tanya introduce herself, tell us where she's calling in from, and then we'll delve into the questions. Thank you so much, Tanya. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you. So my name is Tanja. I'm an intercultural communication coach. I'm originally from Finland, but now I live in a very hot and sunny Mexico. Just 4 hours from the border of Mexico. It's basically mountains and desert here, so no palm trees and beach for me, unfortunately. I have been working as an intercultural communication coach for over 4 years now. And yeah, a serial expat, I would also say, from Australia to Mexico to Malta to Argentina. So yeah, and I use all these experiences when I coach my clients, but also, of course, I have scientific tools to support my own experience to help you guide through all the communication obstacles and challenges that expats face, which one of them is the culture shock.
That's fantastic. I didn't realize you were a serial expat, Tanya. So Tanya was a speaker at the yeah, Tanya was a speaker at the Expat Woman Summit
Mhm.
in March, and there's never enough time to learn about my speakers and what
Yeah.
they do because it's so hectic. So I'm really glad to have you on the show. Very briefly about myself, my name is Nyna Caputi. I'm the founder and CEO of the Expat Woman. It's a global platform for women living across the world, and we provide them with resources, support, and community to help them survive, thrive, and lead successful and happy lives abroad. And I also host the Expat Woman Show, which happens every Tuesday at 9 a.m. PST, 12 noon EST, with amazing coaches and expat leaders and service providers, where we talk about a topic that expats will really benefit from. So,
Mhm.
Tanya, I wanted to ask you before we go into the whole culture shock thing,
Mhm.
what took you to these different countries and how did you finally land up in Mexico? Like, what has that journey been like?
Well, if we start from backwards, it was my husband who is Mexican that brought me into Mexico. Um, but I have been always super curious about different cultures. I remember I was 7, first grade of school in Finland, and I decided that when I'm 18, I'm gonna work in Disneyland Paris because I saw a poster on the school board that when you're 18, you can work in Disneyland. So I started learning French. And it's like, okay, if I can go to Disneyland and Paris and France, maybe I can do exchange abroad. So I did that. When I did my university studies, I actually integrated some of my thesis work to work in Argentina and do research there. After that, I went to Australia. So it's like always been like a big passion of mine to learn about different cultures. But also, the more I learned about cultures, the more I realized that, well, not everything works like in Finland. Um, so then, when I was actually doing my master studies, I came across this article of Deloitte of 6 inclusive traits of inclusive leader, and one of them was cultural intelligence. And I think you had Daniela just a week ago or 2 weeks ago talking about cultural intelligence on your show as well. And that really caught my eye. Like, I had never heard that word in my life, like cultural intelligence. Like, what is that? So I started digging into it. Like, wow, like you can actually, study cultures at this level, like a deeper level of cultural dimension. So what I ended up doing is that I actually wrote my master's thesis on how coaching cultural intelligence can enhance inclusive leadership skills. So that gave me like a big, really big, broad view of how cultural intelligence is super vital skill nowadays. And I was like, okay, I can do this for a living. So then I started my company. Like, kind of taking all those experiences abroad, all the research that I did for my master thesis. I'm like, let's do it. Here I am, 4 years later. You are on mute, yeah.
That is that to me that's really inspiring and fascinating that you started so young. A lot of us do want to travel abroad when we're young, but you kind of also understood the cultural aspects of it, and
Mhm.
it helped you determine your future career. And I think
Mhm.
that's the beauty of living and traveling abroad. It does
Yeah.
open your mind and broadens your horizons, and sometimes your careers become so much clearer when you live abroad. Like if I hadn't moved to the
Mhm.
US, I wouldn't have started the Expat Woman. I have two
Yeah.
cats. I have four cats, and two of my cats have somehow gotten to the room, and they're like playing with my feet. It's hilarious. So let's talk about culture shock at work. Now, did you experience this personally? How did this, because this was a topic you suggested, and
Mhm.
having experienced culture shock in the workplace, understand, the relevance and how it can really affect your life abroad. So,
Mhm.
did you experience it? And if you didn't experience it, what made you decide to also focus on this area and providing help to your clients around overcoming culture shock in the workplace?
Mm, I think this is like you mentioned in some of your newsletters that you have experienced like every form of culture shock because you can experience it as a tourist, you can experience it as a student, you can experience it when you are an expat working for another company. And I have experienced it myself um, because I was very young, so I didn't have all the tools. You know what I have now and what I know about cultures, like how to approach culture shock. And one of the first ones was actually when I was working in Australia. And it was the social interaction that was kind of took me off guard because I was still, as 18-year-old, I was traveling a lot. So I was used to, dealing with different cultures, but then actually working with Australians, it was like another level because after a day at work and socializing with customers, I was working in a hotel. The boss of the hotel actually wanted me to socialize during my free time. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I need to recharge my batteries. And there was a lot of conflict between me and him because of that. Because he hired me because he thought that I was very extrovert, that I would want to, socialize outside the work hours because it was like a small hotel in the outback, and like everyone was super chill, very tight community. And I was like, no, like I need my space here. Like I'm Finn. Like I can have like this much social interaction, and then I need to recharge my batteries. So that was one of my first experiences with workplace culture shock. And then later on, talking with all my expat clients, I noticed that a lot of people go through the same thing, but on different levels. I had one client that it was actually like a couple session. There was the couple who, with their kids, they moved to Mexico, and the mom was really struggling. But it was because she was a mom. She was having the culture shock for her kids, kind of getting like through that. Like she was like, I don't mind, myself if I feel bad. I just feel bad for my kids, dealing with all the schools, and then the husband, going to work where the culture was like relatively same. So that's it's something that I want to emphasize to the world, that culture shock comes in different forms and also in different stages of life. I like now in Mexico, that's what I have been struggling the most. I'm a mom of a 2-year-old, and then I needed to also navigate all the daycares, and and here like you have to rely on word of mouth instead of Googling like I used to do. And it's just like those little things. And then because you're a mom, you're like really worried for your kids. You just want the best of them. So that's one way that culture shock can navigate. Like, and it's like a different job that you have. And then you have also like actual like organizational culture shock with your leader, how you lead the team. Is it very egalitarian way of leading, hierarchical, and all that? So it's like very different. So that's why I want to talk about it a little more. That it's not just 4 chases of culture shock, and you start with a honeymoon phase, and that's it. It can
Right.
manifest in very different ways.
Right. No, I agree because, and yeah, definitely like being a mom is also like a job, and it is,
Mm-hmm.
navigating that whole, schooling and daycare and stuff. But in terms of work, sometimes so I did ask this question, I think in my LinkedIn group on the Expert
Mm-hmm.
Woman page and the Expert Woman Facebook group, and I know sometimes people said even communication styles, because
Mhm.
maybe in one country you're very direct, and then maybe
Yeah.
in another country at work they might skirt around the issue, or even in terms
Mhm.
of you said hierarchy, because like
Mhm.
I came in India, it was pretty hierarchical, and then I come to the US, it's more like a flat structure.
Mhm.
Maybe things have changed in India, but I remember like we wouldn't really eat in meetings. You couldn't, like one company that I worked for, they were so like it was so structured and so formal. Like you
Mhm.
couldn't even go into the bathroom during a meeting was frowned upon, because the boss was he was
Oh,
very
wow.
yeah, he was very autocratic. And then, I came to the US and I saw how flexible it was. You can bring in food, you
Mm.
can now, again, this is not a representation of every country in India,
No.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
but it definitely, it was just more structured, more formal. You didn't
Mhm.
speak unless you were asked to speak to.
Yeah.
And I know there's some countries that can be the case, where the boss is like the god, and then all everyone else is like the serfs, listening to
Mhm.
them. So yeah, so that, but even that, if you're used to one style and then you come to a more flexible, relaxed style where you're encouraged to speak, it
Mhm.
might be hard initially. For me, another thing was, a lot of the pop culture references. So I didn't grow up in the US, and then sometimes at
Yeah.
work, they talk about TV
Mhm.
shows or actors,
Sports is very
sports,
common that you reference sports in some text or
yeah,
yeah context. Yeah.
yeah, or music. So that's some of the
Mhm.
things that I face, and I know people have faced, and I'm just giving you an India US context. So
Mhm.
are there anything, like other specific things that your clients have faced, and then how have you helped them? Uh, are there some strategies you want to share to help them overcome these, challenges?
Mm. Yeah, I would say, well, deadlines has been definitely something that I always talk with my clients because we approach deadlines very differently and time very differently, for example. Um, like, for example, in India, you can find like it can be a little bit more flexible. Like, in some cultures, for example, you can set meetings like 3 months from now, 6 months from now, and that's very common. But then when you go to a little bit more flexible orientation, like in Mexico, for example, like planning a meeting like 3 months from now, it's like what, like why would you do that? Like we don't know where we're at that 3 months, so let's do it next week. Or even like sometimes I feel like everything happens like this, or then it's like super slowly, like let's see. So that's something that we discuss a lot with my clients, like they approach to time and then strategies that they can use with that. And when it comes to those strategies, I think one of the best tools is to do an analysis of your style of communication and working, and then compare that to the country profiles. Just to give you like a little in more detail of what may be causing you the culture shock when you arrive in that country. For example, if you notice that you are very strict on deadlines, you are always on time, like if you arrive 5 minutes late, you give a call to someone. Okay, and then you arrive in Mexico, so that may not be the case. So you just know how to prepare yourself for that. Or if you are coming from a more individualist culture like USA or Finland, where, for example, interviews focus more on your CV, your accomplishments, your skills, you may find it very strange that in Mexico, someone is interviewing you about the personal issues that are actually illegal to ask in other countries, because the focus is a more on building those personal relationships. And the meetings usually start with talking about your family, and just like building in a more in a different level, so that is what those tools and analysis can help you a lot. And then I would say another thing is just to if you cannot do this sort of analysis, just try to find as much as information of the country that you are, but always keep in mind that they're just guidelines. I, for example, here in the city where I live, there's a lot of French companies. So within that company, a lot of the procedures come from France, but then you're also dealing with the Mexican people who work there. So then you kind of also have the clash. And then if you're expat coming from the USA, then you also bring those cultural values there. So you may have a mixture. And I think for you as well, like when you've been living abroad, it also influences your values a lot. So it's like, I'm a Finn, but Tanja, but you don't seem like a Finn at all. It's like, no, I'm not the typical Finn that you think of when you are reading these like country comparisons. Because I've been living abroad, and that has influenced the way I am, the way I behave. And yeah, I would start with that. And then secondly, build a strong network with the locals that, they know what you're going through, like as an expat, like especially if you find a local expat group. If not, then just joining, this community that is Expat Woman is all about. That you can find people who have been moving abroad, so you have that like social interaction. You can share those experiences. You get the mindset like, yes, I'm not alone here. It's okay to feel this way. I think that would be the second strategy that I always recommend to my clients to deal with culture shock. Mm-hmm.
No, great. And yeah, you're right about the stereotypes, because all of us have preconceived notions of perceptions of this is what the country would be like, or this is what the people, like you said, people think because you're Finnish, then they'll think, oh, this is how she behaved. But then you've lived in many countries, you're married to a Mexican, so it's all accumulation of exposure and cultures. I know there was a woman who also responded to my post about culture shock in the workplace, and she was talking about how she's from Germany, where they are, they, like you said, you plan in advance, you stick to the time. Now, for someone from India, I find the US is pretty punctual and organized, but it's interesting. For someone from Germany, that's even more organized and you found the US like kind of flexible and not it's so interesting, right? So I want to talk more about the analysis, because you said you need to analyze. So because just assuming people who are listening to this who want to start, maybe they're moving abroad, or they're going to be working abroad, or even, as you said, you could be working for a company in your local country, but it is a country from, it's a company from another country, so they have some culture. So how do you do this analysis? Like, what are some simple strategies to do an analysis that can help you, perceive what the culture shock is and how to overcome it?
So you can, for example, Erin Mayer, you can just go to her website, and there's like different sort of analysis. You can also find team analysis, and basically you answer different questions, and then the analysis will give you explanation of, based on those compared to some countries, and that you can do independently. It's not that expensive either, so I highly recommend doing it if you're in a low budget. And the way I work with my clients, I'm certified in working style and communication style analysis as well. So the client does the analysis, and then we go it like in very much detail. How, for example, the time orientation with the deadlines, like how that can manifest, and how it's more like a coaching session with me, and specifically focusing on one country. But I would say that just like you can find it online, and then another tool that you can use is called Hofstede Cultural Dimensions, and there you can put two countries one by one, for example, now in Finland and USA, and it will give you a comparison of those countries, so you can have at least like a little bit more detail that what may be the differences here. So those are what I recommend using.
Maybe we'll is it called how do you spell it?
Hofstede. It's I will put it on the comments. Yes, I will put these tools in the comments. It's gonna be easy. Yeah.
Because I think that's really helpful. So whether you're living in the country or planning to move, I think that comparison is so helpful, because I know with cultural intelligence, they encourage you to study the country before you go abroad, but I is taking it to the next level where you're comparing them, which is also helpful, because there's certain things you don't even think about. Because I know in some countries you might call your supervisor Mr. So and so, and then in some countries you call them by your first name, and that can be hard as well. I had another question for you. I'm just pulling it up because you also spoke about managing expectations and how to overcome conflicts and build resilience in the face of different communication styles and
Mm-hmm.
cultural norms. So, do you have any strategies for this? Because we spoke about, how you could maybe, and also bringing in any other tips about overcoming culture shock. Yeah.
First of all, like be patient. I think that is, and like patient with people around you, but also patient with yourself. Because, like I said, like you may not even realize at the first stages of culture shock that you are experiencing culture shock. It can be just like a building up on those like little like moments of frustrations, like why this thing doesn't work like this, like I miss this thing at home. But when they start piling up, well, that's when the culture shock also starts to come in. um, so the best strategy for that is just to celebrate small victories. For example, if you are moving to a country where you don't know the local language, like you cannot expect that you are gonna be fluent in that language in the first 3 months. So setting expectations that, okay, on my first 3 months of learning this new language, I will have the courage to go to cafeteria and buy a cafe in that language. And then when the person behind the counter understands that, okay, this lady just ordered me a coffee, it's like, yes, I did it. Like I did something. So just like a little steps that you can take and celebrating those small victories, and just to understand it that it's up and down all the time. It's like it's still like it's not like you move into a new country, then you go through this culture shock, and then you're done with it, and you will have live, happily ever after. It's the same as you will be living in your passport country. You have those ups and downs in life. So it's not like walking on the roses all the time. And then just to understand, like you also mentioned the communication style. Some people are more direct, some are more indirect. So when you are at the first time in the country, just trying to, listen and learn of the communication style. Like if they're saying yes, did they actually say it or did they mean no? And this can be really tricky. But using this tool that I mentioned, the Erimeyer and Hofstede, they usually they focus on those kind of things. So you can have a hint, okay, if they are saying that, if someone is, for example, inviting you for dinner and they are saying that it's very cold, that maybe let's see, maybe you can take that as a no because they just don't want to leave their house because it's too cold. Where in some other countries, like okay, no worries. Like in Finland, you just put a jacket on. Like no worries, cold is cold, and yes and no, it means no. It's just like those little things that you learn, but it may take a while. I'm still like sometimes struggling here in Mexico, like. Are they gonna call me or not? But learning about these different cultural dimensions will help you, like, at least to be aware that, okay, like, they said that they will call me. It's been 3 hours. They haven't. What happened in between? Was it about the deadlines? Was it about the communication style? Did I say something that make them think otherwise? It comes down to those little nuances that you learn by experiencing the culture, and you cannot learn that in 1 month. So expect obstacles like you would expect also in your own country. And then just to be ready to admit that you don't know it all. I still don't know it all. There's so many cultures in the world that I have no idea how they work. And that's why, you can investigate and you learn on the go. And something for me, about being culturally intelligent is that you admit to yourself that, you are never done with this process. And cultural intelligence is about realizing that, okay, like I'm sensing that this person is now awkward. What did I do? What did I say? And apologize. Like, oh, I'm sorry if I insulted you or I said something wrong. Like, can you please explain to me? And then I will learn and they will learn. And then, we can start building that trust and that communication a little better.
That's fantastic. So what I gleaned from what you said was patience, also apologizing and asking for help, right? Because sometimes we feel like we know everything, and it's not possible. And so I totally agree. I like what Laura had to say She said, Lauren, sorry. Lauren said, when I moved to the Middle East, my top tip is patience and abundance. Yeah, because
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah, I think you have to be patient. It's a part of the whole game, and I think you have to also not be too hard on yourself.
Mhm.
And I'm sure once we get those tools, people, we're going to share the tools you shared. That would be helpful. So we are almost at the end, and we could continue. I mean, this is such a fascinating conversation. But
Yeah.
yeah, whenever I interview someone from another country, I always like to get a little glimpse of the country they're currently living,
Mhm.
or even from the, because we're talking about culture shock. So maybe what was your biggest culture shock when you moved to Mexico, either in the workplace or in the country? And then what is one thing that you love about Mexico that's possibly different from your home country, Finland?
One of the biggest culture shock for me was definitely time. Like in Finland, you are very punctual. You always arrive on time or earlier to the meetings. If you're the 5 minutes late, you give a call that I will be there 5 minutes late. And in Mexico, I remember the first time when I came here to visit my family and we were planning a trip. And I got ready at like 6 a.m. to go. And then still at 8 a.m., people were preparing breakfast. Like, what is happening? And then because I didn't speak the language that well, I was so frustrated. I was so stressed because I never knew what was going on. I couldn't, use the words. I needed to use my husband as an interpreter. It was so frustrating to me, like so frustrating. Like, why these people cannot be on time and explain when they say these things to me? And then later on, like I'm actually like now very much embracing it. I love that I don't have to be on time, especially with a toddler, and you get that like, yeah, I don't want to put my clothes on. It's like, oh, okay, well, don't put your clothes on. Like, we are just gonna arrive a little late on this event that we are supposed to go. So now I'm like, I started to see all the benefits of coming more flexible culture, not being that tight when it comes to clock and meetings and stuff. I still try to be on time, but for example, I have also learned to use strategies. If I'm inviting someone to be here, I want them to be here at 4. I always invite them at 3, and then they arrive at 4. So, and it's just like these little things that you learn on the go. But yeah, that was really hard on me, like not understanding the language and then not understanding, that the time here is very different for the Mexicans. Another thing was, like I said, like I used to be like kind of like shy. I needed some like batteries to recharge of the social interactions. And here, like people don't call you; they just show up at your doorstep. It's like, huh, hey, we came to visit. I was like, well, I haven't prepared. I haven't cleaned my house. Go away, people. But now I also like find that very lovely. That you don't have to make an appointment or give a call whenever you want to meet someone. You just come and show up, and you have that interaction. And of course, my son loves it. That all his aunts and grandparents, they just come and they play with him, and then it's like, oh, okay. So it's, yeah, I would date those two social interactions, and then the deadlines were the hardest on me. And like I said, like goes also now that I have learned to love about Mexico, that the family here is super tight. Like you meet on a like very irregular and irregular basis. And of course, you cannot come to Mexico and not love the food.
I
It's
love
very
it.
rich. Yeah, yeah. The food here is amazing. Yeah.
It's very similar to India, the culture, because my husband's American. And like initially, when we visit India, he's like, what is with the time? And even till today, I've been in the US 21 years. You can take an Indian out of India, but you can't take India out of the Indian. I'm still like half punctual after living here for so many years. And also
Yeah.
in India, people will show up at your doorstep and want to visit. And
Hmm.
but I've become more Americanized where I make appointments. And I think the good thing when people will drop in at any time, you always have your house neat, right? Because
Yeah.
yeah, they show up. I better keep my house neat and tidy, but so there's, yeah. mean, it's just interesting, But I know you didn't use that. Maybe if you had used that tool when you moved to Mexico, did you use the tool before you moved to Mexico, the comparison tool?
Mm, well, when we moved here, I have been already, doing this for a living for a while. But then when I met my husband already 10 years ago, I had no idea that these tools even exist. So no, I knew, something about the culture, but it still came as a shock. But it definitely would have helped me to know those tools.
Right. I like what Lauren is sharing. She said she believes in prepping international assignments, being open-minded and embrace the cultural differences. In my experience, expats who constantly compare things to their home country don't stick it out long enough to overcome the challenges. That is so true. I think, I know people who constantly compare one country to their home, to the country they moved to their home country, and they're so unhappy because all they see is the cons and not the pros. So thank you, Lauren, for sharing that. I think that's really powerful. So, Tanya, we have come to the end of this our interview, but I'd love for you to share with people how they can find you, how they can connect with you, how they can work with you. So just go ahead and let us know.
Well, best way to connect with me is through LinkedIn. I think that's one of the few channels in social media that I'm actually active and post valuable content. So please connect with me. And then another resource is my website. I write a blog. There's a lot of blog posts about cultural differences, about intercultural communication, all this communication style. What is culture shock? What is cultural training? So there you can find a lot of resources that can also help you to realize all those cultural dimensions with the tools that I mentioned. And I always try to write everything in a very practical way. So from there you can also get more tips. And there in my website you can get all my official channels, contact details, or you can book a meeting with me as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tanya, for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who's watching this live and those who will watch the replay. Tanya, if you can share the two tools and the link to your,
absolutely.
And also the link to your website in the comments.
Yeah.
This is streaming on LinkedIn and on YouTube, so people who go to both the channels can connect with you. And I will be back next week. Next week I'll be interviewing another speaker from the Expat Woman Summit, Naveen, and we'll be talking about Dubai because, and Lauren, you might be interested in that because it's all about the Middle East and stuff. But thank you all for joining me, and I will see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.